Aloha and welcome back. Before we begin, we would like to just share a few reminders for attendees who are seeking CLE credit for this event. For those attending in person, please make sure you've already checked in with the law review people up front in front of CR2. Please make sure to also sign out with them before you leave. And then for all CLE attendees, please email the law review after the event to receive your CLE certificate. So now we will begin panel 4 titled Water Issues on the Road Ahead. This final panel will highlight some of the major challenges to freshwater management in Hawaii that lawmakers, administrators, and community members can expect to face in the near future. This panel will explore how the Public Trust Doctrine can be leveraged to achieve resource equity and climate resilience in our communities across Hawaii. Specific attention will be given to water policy decisions that are critical to Maui Komohana's recovery. We envision this panel to be forward-looking, hopeful, and promising. Serving as our moderator for panel 4 is Holly Doyle. Holly K. Doyle is a third-year law student at the William S. Richardson School of Law and a research assistant at Kahuliau Center for Excellence in Native Hawaiian Law. For the last 3 semesters, Holly has worked through the Native Hawaiian Rights Clinic to support the Maui Komohana community. In her time at law school, Holly has produced legal scholarship with a focus on restorative justice initiatives for Indigenous peoples and has published pieces in the University of Hawaiʻi Law Review and the New York University Review of Law and Social Change. Her piece, E Hoʻi Nani, I Mokuʻula La, the Commission on Water Resource Management's Public Trust Duty to Fully Restore Mokuʻula and Mokuhinia, will be published in the Law Review's forthcoming symposium issue later this spring. Holly is a beginner haumana at Halau Hula Ka Lehua Tuahine, studying under Kumu Hula Ka Ilihiva von Darval. Thank you so much, Holly, for being here. I'll now turn it over to you to introduce our wonderful panelists for today.
Thanks, Leanna. Hi, everyone. I am really excited and grateful to be part of this event and honored to be in conversation with these 3 powerhouse panelists as we discuss water issues on the road ahead. I will say that in my limited publishing experience, UH's law review is the best, the most responsive, the most caring. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to work with all of you too. That said, I do have a bone to pick with you because, as Leanna said, the intention behind this panel is that it be forward-looking, promising, and hopeful, and yet you have scheduled me to go after Kapua's panel on plantation disaster capitalism. So I wonder if I've been set up for success. Also, I'm standing in the way of you and spring break or just going home. But when I look to my right and I look out into the audience, I know that we have been set up for success. Dr. Jonathan Lee Keke Scheuer has more than 25 years of experience helping clients manage environmental conflict in both the public and private sectors. As the principal of Kahalavai Consulting, Jonathan's goal is to create pathways to shared, sustainable prosperity for the communities and AINA involved. He served as a policy analyst for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs with a focus on water rights, and later served as the first director of the agency's land management group. Jonathan has served on the Oahu Island Burial Council and the Hawaii Land Use Commission, serving as chair of the Land Use Commission during the last 4 years of his term. Recently, Jonathan was selected to chair the newly formed East Maui Water Authority and Community Board. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for sharing your time and your mana'o. Next, Na'alehu Anthony is a Native Hawaiian activist, changemaker, and storyteller from Ka'aava, Oahu. Obviously, Lehu couldn't be here with us in person today, but we really appreciate you zooming in. Lehu is the chair for the Honolulu Board of Water Supply and the board's designated lead on remediation policy for the Red Hill contamination crisis. He co-founded OEV-TV, the first Hawaiian language and culture-focused television network. His production company, Poliku Films, helps bring voice to Hawaii's stories through documentaries and oral histories. Na'alehu is a lifelong community advocate and supporter of the Hawaiian language revitalization movement and collaborates closely with community-serving partners to create new opportunities in policy, media, production, and communications for students, teachers, and community members across the islands. Lastly, Kaipo Keikona is a kupa of Maui Komohana. He is one of the leaders for Kuya Agricultural Education Center, a 12.5-acre farm that educates students in the Maui community in Hawaiian agricultural traditions. Kaipo is the po'o for the Aha Moku o Maui Council for the Ka'anapali Moku, where he advocates for resource protection and traditional Native Hawaiian management practices. He served as president of both the Lahaina chapter of the Hawaii Farmers Union United and the organization's statewide president. Kaipo has dedicated his time and expertise as a board member of the Na'aikane o Maui Cultural Center, which we lost in the August 2023 fires, and as a member of Na Papa Kanaka o Pu'u Kohola. Since the August 2023 fires, Kaipo has organized distribution centers to provide emergency supplies to fire survivors and champions community-led restoration efforts as Lahaina begins to rebuild. Importantly, he is one of the loudest voices for the restoration of Lahaina's expansive food forest and breadfruit grove Kamalu'ulu Olele. So let's just get into it. This first question I have for you folks is, given the tenor of the panel on plantation disaster capitalism, I want to talk about the things that already exist that are helping us manage fresh water, manage vai in pono ways. So before we begin envisioning the future of freshwater management in Hawaii, could each of you share about existing efforts you're a part of that were created to stop the cycle of extraction and exploitation of vai? And Jonathan, I'll start with you, just because I'm thinking about the East Maui Community Water Authority.
Mahalo. One of the small actions we took yesterday at our second meeting is to refer to ourselves consistently as Ahawai o Maui Hikina. So trying to reframe really what this group is about. So if you don't know about it, there's a little bit of history. Obviously for over a century, Maui County, Maui Island has been dependent on one of its most significant water resources, even though the waters emanate from so-called ceded lands in Maui Hikina on a private entity, Alexander and Baldwin and now Mahipono, to divert that water to central Maui. And so the Maui Board of Water Supply, which is a different board of water supply than the other three counties in that they're actually not the governing body of the Department of Water Supply. So they've ended up being really interesting and independent in some ways compared to the other three counties. And they set up a temporary interaction group as Mahipono was pursuing a long-term lease for the waters emanating from state-controlled lands in East Maui, to a temporary interaction group to investigate whether or not it would be appropriate for the counties to step in and ask for the license. And they concluded it would be, they presented to the county council. The county council in 2021 was like, that makes sense to us. They unanimously sent a letter to the Board of Land Natural Resources that said, we'd like to do this. And then in 2022, a follow-up letter was sent, but no action was taken. And so somewhat out of frustration, the council put on the charter a charter ballot in the 2022 election, a proposed creation of regional water authorities that could take on this role of acquiring water assets and essentially managing it as an additional utility. There was some confusion that actually still persists that says oh wait, you're trying to step into the role of the Water Commission? No, Water Commission remains the Water Commission. Aaron Strauch remains their hydrologist. Uncle Neil and successors remain the ones deciding allocation, but this is to step in the role as the utility actually delivering things, because we actually know that part of the fulfilling the public trust really does depend on not just the decisions of the Water Commission, but the decisions made at the utility level. So the measure passed overwhelmingly, like 64%, got more votes than any council member except for Tamara Paulton. Then it took a long time to seat the board. Wayne Tanaka alluded to it a little bit. There was some controversy around me being attacked by a prominent Maui housing developer who, for the record, I've never actually met in my entire life. I've never met Everett Dowling, but he saw fit to write a letter talking about how horrible I was and how all the large landowners and unions and everybody disliked me. One of the more gratifying parts was he listed out the large landowners. He's like, and Maui Land and Pine hates this guy too. And then I got this very polite and sad call from the CEO of Maui Land and Pine. He's like, I didn't say that, I'm like, yeah, no, I worked with you on burial council issues when you were on Oahu. So things turned around. I finally got seated in July, and we were supposed to meet in August for the first time. And then, of course, the fires. So that shifted things. So really, there's, the charter amendment isn't perfect. The process isn't perfect. But the basic question that was asked of the people of Maui County, and particularly Maui Island, was, are you comfortable with having a private county entity control this utility for the next 30 years, or would you like to try and step into those shoes? And so it really is a precedent-setting effort. I'm super, I did not want any leadership role on it, but my fellow board members asked me to. Former Mayor Arakawa also wanted to be the board chair, but I was elected, and super awesomely, the vice chair is Kyle Nakanelua. And so we just had our second meeting. We took 3 actions yesterday, including to refer to us as the Hawaii o Maui Hikina. We've sent our first official letter to BLNR saying, hey, we were created, the charter passed, we were created, we've been impaneled, and here's the history of it, and we're formally requesting you to start the process of turning the license over to us. And then we also set out our position description. So the army that Professor Sproat has been building for many years, if you know of candidates who might want to step into this key leadership role, we need somebody. So it's a really different kind of thing that's been going on. But I think it's something that I've heard some people in Maui Komohana articulate as maybe that's the way to address what Kekai was talking about how many of the water assets, the utility assets, are in private hands. The other thing, and Kalamai, I only came for the afternoon, so I don't know if any discussion of the Public Utilities Commission rate case happened today? So also happening, in terms of responding to your question of things currently happening, the Launeopoko Irrigation Company, which is controlled by, has been seeking an increasing rate increase because after they had to supposedly comply with reduced withdrawals from Kauola Stream, they increased pumping of groundwater wells, including 2 wells which are alternately known as Waine'e A and B or Lahaina Shaft A and B, which are directly mauka of Mokuhinia and Moku'ula. And so I am an expert witness for the Division of the Consumer Advocate. Very pleased to note that the Division of the Consumer Advocate filed a statement of position in that case that said, following the principles in Kauai Springs, either the Public Utilities Commission should simply deny their application to use those until the Water Commission has taken action on the competing applications for water from there between LIC and Naikane o Maui, or that they should hold them to the much higher informational burden that the Hawaii Supreme Court case, drawing ultimately on the precedent set by Chief Justice Richardson in McBride and then fulfilled in Kauai Springs, that the PUC should hold them to a much higher standard. So those are 2 things that are going on that I think are potentially hopeful. We're going in our post-fire continuing disaster capitalism world.
Awesome. Thank you for that. You can see why Jonathan is a panelist. That's just such a wealth of knowledge. How about you, Lehu? You are the chair of the Honolulu Board of Water Supply. I'm kind of curious if you could tease out for us why the boards of water supply are maybe more insulated from the political shenanigans that we've been seeing take place in Maui Komohana and with the commission. So yeah, just curious what you have to say about that.
I think there's some really interesting challenges that come with the way that the Maui water supply has fed into this new version of what came out of the plantation days, and that the way in which the transition took place, like they never let go of the water, right? And whereas on Oahu, you have a much different set of circumstances and a different scale and scope of what has to happen when you're needing to purvey water to around 1 million people. And so it's just like, when I got there after the and started to learn more about the grind information about how the Maui water system worked, I was shocked. I really had no idea. Most of the time and effort that I had spent was on the Oahu water supply. I can say that, the fight over water and not only the use, but the protection of water in the way in which we make sure that it's safe to drink is only going to escalate. And for those of you who have been watching what has happened in the last 30 or so months with respect to Red Hill, you'll know that the poisoning of the Pearl Harbor water system isn't finished, and that we're still seeing low-level detections of TPH, and it sounds like there's going to be another fight over whether or not those readings are deemed accurate based on the kind of testing that's taking place. But we also know that in the near term, there were, upwards of 19,000 gallons of jet fuel that were injected into the aquifer. And in the 80-year history of the facility, there were somewhere between 600,000 and 2 million gallons of releases that are either in the vadal zone or in the aquifer. And so one of the things that the board and Ernie and Owen, as well as the state and the city have been working on, is looking at what a shared agreement might look like. The federal government should be able to engage monitoring and remediation in and around the Red Hill and Halawa area, so that hopefully one day we have a better understanding of the science with the hydrology as in the area, as well as sentinel monitoring as well, that would allow us to look at what the aquifer can bear in future years. But I think what we've seen in Maui Komohana since August, and before that, and what we're seeing with Red Hill is really a precursor to the kinds of battles that are going to come up when we're talking about how it is that we engage either other purveyors or other users and people who have what I would call like outsized power in the conversation to really make for outsized change into water use. And so I'm just really thankful to this panel today and the discussion that's being had here, so that we can not only bring this to light, but find the people who are willing to get in the fight and push forward for change in policy at the state and federal level.
Thanks so much, Lehu, for drawing those parallels between the Red Hill crisis and what's been going on in Maui Komohana, and characterizing them as symptoms of a larger problem that's been going on for a really long time. Kaipo, how about you? What currently exists in the way of community management of water resources?
For me, it's kind of can go back from when I was a little kid, just sitting in family discussions, hearing all kupuna talk on. For me, what brought the light of our water issues for West Maui was, long ago, nobody really talks much about it, but Honokohau Valley, we heard a little bit about that place today, but they had a water case that they won several decades ago. And still to today, the allocations that was mandated by the court system have never met the yield that they're supposed to have been returning to that stream. And that stream was largely diverted for the greater population of all of Komohana, Maui. And so I used to hear those conversations of our kupuna that was advocating for those needs of our community, and then, you know, whether it was the fishermen seeing the impacts of the marine life or the mahiai that was in the mountains, and then learning more about water issues with DHHL when I was living for a little bit on Hawaii Island, learning of the struggles of the homesteads of Waimea and how they lack water, and even growing older and finding relationships, cultural relationships with the indigenous Native Americans of America, and finding out that, you know, there's places in their reservations that have 30% of their residents that don't have water in their house at all. So then I, you know, go get back home and used to try and deny that was any kuleana and try to shelf that off as much as I could, and came around to start my own family and bringing kids into the world, and then, you know, you kind of can't run away from much after that. So yeah, it started, you know, finding out, being a part of sea worms discoveries with the interim in-stream flow standards in Lahaina, advocating for our kuleana families, asserting, you know, facilitating that process of being a part of that discussion with those families who may not be ready to explore those conversations. They've been living in the conditions for a long time, and so faith and hope is difficult to come across when you live oppressed for that long. And so being in that room and helping them and listening, and then becoming a full-time farmer and trying to produce food for the family and the community, you find yourself attending water committee meetings and going to PUC hearings for rate increases, and testifying at CWORM and getting to know their staff, and you just got to put in the work. And so just keep moving forward with that and understanding the numbers, understanding the yields, looking at the studies, looking at the impacts, trying to look at projection use, you know, getting involved at the planning commission levels and hearing what the projections are for growth and development and different needs, and just knowing and realizing that we already was exceeding our yield as it was. Just more, you know, it became more evidential that no matter how much you want to try and turn your cheek and run away, just every corner you turn, there was a need to advocate for our water and the safety of it. So it's kind of where I come from.
Yeah, everything that you're saying about advocacy is just a really great transition into the next question. And I'll start with you again, Kaipo. So we hear a lot about the need for kind of a two-pronged legal and social movement for change approach to actually be really effective. As Uncle Paul said earlier today, lawyers can't win in the courts unless the community is mobilized and succeeds in the court of public opinion. So Kaipo, can you speak to the hard work of community mobilization, especially when so many folks have gone through and are going through really intensely traumatic experiences with the fires?
Struggles, yeah. Unprecedented for what we're dealing with in Lahaina. Yeah? It's difficult to try and have the conversation with your community. And you may have heard it from Kai when he referenced, you know, like that next level of understanding where we're at and trying to communicate that is not easily established in the wake of a disaster. So building the capacity, trying to bring people forward. First, you have to address and hear them. You cannot walk into these rooms and just try to impose, even no matter how good it is, you cannot just impose upon our community at this moment any interest of change when they aren't stable in their own conditions. So it's tough, and all you can do is be there for them. And for me, the success is relevance to what Kai said, you know, the up and coming youth. Not only are they at our capitals, not only are they at our commission meetings and giving testimony, but they in the lo'i, and they in the streams, whether they're dry or they're wet, and they're watching and they're learning. And you know, this coming week, Uncle Paul mentioned Waihe'e and the work that he did there and the water systems that were argued for that. And today you can go back into Waihe'e, and maybe we did see it at one point where kalo was returning and communities were farming once again. But you go back today, that stream is dry once again. And we're going to be spending a week coming Monday with our youth camp in Waihe'e and hiking streams and looking at the mulivai, just doing a kilo observation of what we've seen and making that relevant to where we're going when we get back home to Lahaina and understand our stream systems there better, and know that even when you may win a battle, that the rest of the war rages on and that you cannot ever really go to sleep, because we're going to keep coming. So that's the effort that we work with our community and build empower them and understand what power we have and the need we have for not control, but the proper use of our water and distribution of it is very much needed to be reinforced within our community. We never had the opportunities that we have today. We were already bound and restricted from having those moments to even dream. And so now we cannot dream because we don't have comfortable places to rest our head, but we have to dream because the moment is at our footstep, you know, it's at our doorstep. And so just trying to bring the comfort to the community so that we can have that conversation, so that we can see the value, so that we can be empowered and we can have hope and belief that there is something for us out there. We just need to go and be active and engage in that.
Lehu and Jonathan, can you share a little bit about your approach in co-powering these communities in these times of crisis when Kaipo was saying they're not able to dream right now? Lehu, I'll start with you.
So I think a couple of things. I think first and foremost, it's clear that the community has to be and is the driver in so many different ways for the change that needs to come about. You would not have seen the kind of effort take place and the pressure put on the federal system for the defueling of their bill without people like Wayne Tanaka and Helena Sonoda and others who've stood up to bring forth the kind of systematic engagement of different pillars in the community to bring them together to put pressure on the system. And if it was just the Ernie Laos and those folks, it would not have happened. It required everyone to come together. And I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle when we're talking about the possibilities at Maui Komohana. I think that there are so many different eyes on the challenges in Maui right now that the policy changes that take place in Maui or not are going to be a signal to what's possible into the future. And I can't underscore that enough, but the idea that we have this huge disparity in water use, the idea that there are these the haves and the have-nots are situated right next to each other, and within just a few tenths of a mile from the edge of Lahaina, you have green, verdant, large quantities of water. You have fountains, you have lakes, and then you go into Lahaina proper, and it's dry, and the grass can't grow, right? And you look at where the fires went and where they didn't. And so that's a really important piece of the puzzle when we're talking about what might be required into the future. Now, the second piece is also really important. And thank you for asking the question the way you did. it's for people from Maui Komohana to lead that discussion. You know, subject matter experts who come in to offer mana'o or help. They have to take a back seat to what the kupa of Maui Komohana want. And so it's really clear to me that, and it's delicate, right? Because, you know, Kaipo, what she said is absolutely right. It's like, how do you dream when you don't have a place to sleep every night? And so there's a, you know, for like, you know, I spent time trying to help in Lahaina and in Leali'i, and you know, that role is, you got to start every meeting with, like, oh, hi, my name is Na'alehu, and I'm not from here, right? Because it's important to set the tone of where the voices are, that come from that place and who have spent time on that land and who know the granular facets of what they want in moving forward. So, you know, the community is everything, and I think it's really important that folks who come from these places that are heavily impacted have a say that we can then understand and follow with in the ways that we can with the tools that we have.
Thank you. Jonathan, how about you?
I'm really glad Kaipo started with like the continuing ongoing suffering and daily struggle of life that folks are facing. On Oahu, we can be distant from it. Some of my friends in like Wailuku say, yeah, it's kind of weird. Like life here is normal, yet around the corner it is not. And like one of the ways, just to so one of my close colleagues is a woman who lost her home upcountry during the fires, and just a couple small stories that like help us connect with that if we're not intimately involved with that. Like 3 weeks after the fires, she was with her family and everybody had done laundry and folded their clothes, and they're like, oh, you know, you got to fold your clothes now. She's like, oh no, I folded mine. And then they're like, no, there they are. And she realized like, oh, because those were not my clothes 2 weeks ago, right? I lost everything. And then recently she hit this, which sounds kind of funny maybe if you're from outside, but like purchasing fatigue. And it was like, I think her breaking point was like diced ginger. She needed it for a recipe, but it was like, I'm not going to go to the supermarket one more time for things that I used to know exactly where to reach to in the kitchen. And it's just, even if you're housed, even if you have support things, there's still this incredible struggle, much less if you're still living in a hotel. I think it's one of the reasons why it is so important, and Kikai talked about this, that this very basic idea that our housing problem across Hawaii, but particularly Maui Komohana, is not about a lack of units. It's about a lack of what they're used for, and that we have more than enough temporary housing to house all of the people in Maui Komohana who want to be there. So the more we can do to actually just directly support those communities so their voices can be heard is critical. That said, speaking to what I've observed now of the process of trying to create the Ahawai o Maui Hikina, the opposition we face is at 2 levels. One is there's just the obvious direct opposition of people who are fighting this because it's going to cost them money. It's clear it's not really sophisticated, right? Cheap water from East Maui from Maui Hikina is something they want to desire to keep flowing for easier and greater profits. But the other more subtle opposition is from even people who intuitively in their like get that this is going. It's like there's also this like, oh, but we cannot do this, right? We gotta depend on the plantation there, the ones who've always done it. And so really, you know, enlarging on winning in the court of public opinion, to use a slightly harsh word, but it was used in a conversation with me today, is like people's minds are enslaved to how the world used to be. And part of our job is liberation. And so I really want to echo and uplift another thing Kikai said about like, when did the fires start? Right? And like, just to riff on that, right? The question is not when was the fires put out, but when are they going to be put out? Because it's still burning, right? So I think to the degree we can get people to understand the daily suffering that we're going through as a community, the more we'll actually get people to then understand and see the connections of what's necessary.
Another of the questions that I had you spoke to about some of the major challenges that you currently experience or foresee in operationalizing the law on the ground. So, Lehu, I would turn it back to you to ask that just in your experience, especially given the fact that in many areas of Hawaii, Maui Komohana in particular, there's simply not enough wai to go around to satisfy all of the wants, all of the needs. And so what guidance do you have for decision makers for how best to allocate our wai?
So that's a really complicated question. And, you know, there are obviously a number of pressures that sit on all of the different takings of water out of aquifers across the state. And one of the things that I would say is that we have this increasing pressure on, like in chemistry class in Chem 101, they talk about what's the limiting reactant. You know, in fire, it's air and fuel and heat. And when one of those things runs out, the fire goes out. As it turns out, when we're talking about how many people can we fit on an island, we can actually externalize a number of the reactants. We can externalize the building materials. We can externalize the oil. We can externalize. We can build more houses into arable land. But one of the things that is the limiting reactant is water. Is how much water do we have available to us? And we see that in a very real way in what the Board of Water Supply is dealing with right now and being able to meet charter because we've turned off 15 million gallons of service every day because of the red oil crisis. When it comes down to Maui Komohana, it's like the policymakers have an opportunity to reset right now when you're talking about who gets to choose where the water goes, and that the fact that the purveyors have the people who've been moving the water have had an outsized voice in that because they're the ones who own the transportation system. And I think, therefore, they think they own the water as well. You get this placement of, not many people being able to change that for decades, right? Dragging these things out in court for decades only gives them a longer leash on controlling the resource. And so what we have right now in this crisis at Maui Komohana is an opportunity to engage this conversation in a different way than we have before for decades. And the reason is because the way in which there is so much pressure on the system to see something different. I haven't had that before. And I think the cautionary part for policymakers is that if we have a set of outcomes that leave things largely unchanged with respect to water in West Maui, then the people who are in power will know that they can do anything they want and nothing will change the system of power. Like the staying the same, the holding to what is the way it has been this whole time is a really dangerous thought for what will become in the future if we don't act. It's the same. The parallels are uncanny with respect to Red Hill as well. If you don't get the Navy and the Department of Defense to clean up and monitor Red Hill, then moving forward, they will know they can do anything with very little responsibility to the future of how they change the face of
I don't know if we're succeeding at the hopeful thing. So I wanted to ask a question that I think will help get us there. And Kaipo, I will start with you. So a former professor of this law school, Mari Matsuda, she's a key figure in the development of critical race theory, often talks about the importance of utopian visions in movement building, and that you have to know the ultimate goal to meet the interim steps along the way and build pilina in the process. So I'm curious, what is your utopian vision of wise stewardship? What can we do to make that vision a reality? And I think Lehu spoke to this a little bit too, and I know Uncle Kai has as well, about if there's any silver lining that we're given an opportunity to do things differently from how we've always done them or how they have been done here.
Sure. First off, I don't see it as an opportunity, but definitely as an obligation. Kai kind of touched on some of that earlier when people scream and push about mokuhinia, and it's our community, which is amazing because we've been doing that work for a long time, and it was difficult to find people that valued it, and let alone believe that it could be obtainable. But there's a really broad platform that we're looking at here, right? When you talk about the economics, understanding how much tax our little town created for the state, up to 17%, came out of our town. So then the economic loss that we're experiencing, the hardship for housing, we are already exceeding our sustainable yield. People want to talk about desalinization and what impacts that creates upon the environment. It's just going from one resource to another. Depleted one, let's go suck up another one and work on that one next. And then just understanding what it's going to take to get us to a point where we see all of those parts working in place, where we no longer are secondary citizens to the tourism industry, and that we are at a level playing field. A lot of things need to happen. First of all, you look at what's coming up right around the corner, right? There's these pushes for all of these long-term temporary housing units that will be built up in Lahaina town. We lost roughly about, let's be simple math, and I'm not accurate at all, but let's say 6,000 structures. Something happened. When you look at that and what they're going to build up, they're going to try to build up to replace that. And I understand the fact that we will hit a gap in the systems that are available to secure our community, and that we are making those efforts in light of that structural build-up to meet that gap. If we were to move into short-term rental systems and really understood how long we'll need to live in those, we're not going to just live in them for a year, and all we have as support systems to keep us in those units is a year. So I see why we need to build these housings. But we also need to understand that when those things are built up, and they're built up to fit the need of our community that has been displaced, that was already exceeding the yield. Now when we go back to our properties and we rebuild this vision that we'll have, those other units will still be available and will be filled. And where do we justify the allocation of water then? Is it going to be the people that have housing that are already there, or the people that are still building their homes that need to tap onto water systems now? Those are some of the small problems. They're big, but there's bigger issues, right? And commonly we find ourselves today asking for a seat at the table, and I'm come to the point where I no longer want a seat at the table. I used to say I want our name engraved on that so that we can never have to ask for a seat again. It is our permanent seat. Give our community a stakehold in the movement and decision making that's happening at the state level and county levels now. They said community led and government supported, but we are having a difficult time to see how that's reality. So no longer am I interested at a seat at a table. I'm more interested at where this meal that's going to be prepared for the people sitting at this table to discuss on and partake in, where was those ingredients sourced from? Who was the people that collected those to make this meal and bring it to the table? I want to be there. I don't want to be at the table anymore, because the table is just some place where you get to look at something that is already designed. I've learned that in this process. We've pushed for seats at the table. Now I'm sitting at 4 other committees and commissions that I never was a part of and never really dreamed of being a part of to begin with. But to find a seat at the table to make sure that we do have a voice in saying what's going to happen, but realizing that we really don't have a voice, that the menu is already created, the ingredients are already sourced, the recipe is in place. Here's the meal. What do you think? How does it taste? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? And then it continues on. And so how do we go forward with a positive vision? I told all these rich guys that we were a part of a discussion with at a different thing a few weeks ago. I said, you guys want to help? You guys have all this power, and you've had all this power, and you've never really made change for us to begin with. Collect all your resources. Get all your money together. Buy all of Maui's water systems entirely, the whole county, including the Molokai Ranch that our community on Molokai has been fighting against for this time. Buy them all and give it to our community. Don't give it to the state or the county. Give it to the community. Let the control be in our community. Then we have that permanent seat at the table where decisions are made. And when recipes need to be created, every single recipe of any meal requires water. We'll have that seat there. We can say where this ingredient is coming from and how much of it you can have. And even if you look at other states and continents, people will say it's unconstitutional. We want to talk about law and restoring water. We mentioned today of the Constitution written in Lahaina. How many of us know where that Constitution derived of? It derived of water. That was a pond. That was a spawning pond in Mokuhinia. That pond itself was taking its management practices and written into our law as a kingdom of how to better serve our people. If you look at Lahaina's history of Kamalu'ulu'olele, the buildup of that started in the 600s, according to our research, and it was never completed till its capacity that we honor today until 1,000 years later, 1600s with Pi'ilani. This timeline doesn't speak to us just because we wanted to make a great place and be the high sustaining yield. It happened all the way across the kingdom of Hawaii. And it was because we experienced the same conditions we're experiencing prior to August 8th, 2023. We were short of housing. We don't have food security. We already know all of those data. Our legislative and lawmakers have been speaking to this subject for decades as well. But we haven't seen any of that adjusted or directed or any really effort made forward to make better conditions for our environment and our people. Lahaina's history to get to Kamalu'ulu'olele spoke very much of that same existence and that same struggle that we had. We exceeded our yields. We've no longer could sustain our existence as a population, and so we began to plant more out. And we designed that on a 300-year basis plan. Then we went in, and some lady came in around 900 ADs and managed to put forward a sustainable plan that projected out for 17 generations. There was never a need to increase food, water production, yields, housing. Never was a conversation again for another 700 years. Why are we not having that ability to look at that kind of a perspective in what we're doing today? How do we generate circular economies and environmental and conservation efforts to be in line with our current existing problems that we have? If it's food security, if it's invasive species, if it's watershed management, all of that has to be viewed in one scope, and that's what our kupuna was great at. And that's what everybody appreciates so much about Hawaii. When we talked about earlier, what's his name? Tanaka Maori guy. He said something, remember love, right? Yeah. He said love, and that's love. Like, why does everybody move here? Because they love our place. Why do they love our place? Because it was a great place to be. Why was it a great place to be? Because we listened to the environment. Kai said it as well. He said, you know what? The vast continents and the resources stretch so far. In Hawaii, we're going to get right there and right there. So anything that happens in between your watershed and your mulivai going to slap you in your face real quick. And you got to make decisions that can better that in existence, or you, in the end, fail. You lose. Because when we all go away, because we cannot live here any longer, the place can heal by itself. It's going to take back its own place. And before you know it, Kamalu'ulu'olele, that was 10 acres square, whatever, square miles, 10 square miles in size, whatever, 15 acres Mokuhinia, 7 acres Alamihi, whatever the details there are not important. Understanding that that started with nothing. It was a mulivai or a punawai or a lu'uvai that started our kupuna, being able to observe those conditions and seeing the value in them, and then said we need to expand upon these natural environmental occurrences that provide us with the necessities we need. And so if we can look at that again, pivot our focus, never mind chasing these dreams of whatever we're chasing down this road, surrendering to tourism. We've seen it in COVID. None of that was placed for us. And then now we see them right back in Lahaina once again, hardcore. Nothing of any of the systems in place serve us in any way. We're struggling to even exist in our own community today. And so if we're going to talk about this glorious rebuild and all of that, it's going to, Nale said it's going to start with the people, but how much of a position do our people have to even say how things are going to happen if we have nothing? We have nothing. And so give us the water. That's the number one solution. There's continents and states all around the world, nations that are doing that, even within America. So it is not unconstitutional. If you look at Colorado, what is it called over there, that destination tourist rich place?
Aspen.
Aspen. If you look at Aspen, Colorado, yeah, okay, for me, I just hear rich, multi-million-dollar people, but you try to look at their housing conditions, and you try to see what the homeless population rate is. Yeah, it's freezing, but and you look at the homeowner, the workforce housing systems, it exceeds by far the rich gentleman estate housing systems in there, even though they're known for that. Yeah, it is a rich destination, tourist destination for the rich, but they take care of their own community and people, and they've managed to leverage their own state governance. So then it's a political backbone that we need, right? I cannot go for a living, literally right now, my job is to have a part in advocating at the Capitol for agriculture. I cannot even go there in this time right now because I'm enraged. It's furious in my head. And I'm going to be yelling and screaming and cussing down people. And what did the Ara uncle say? Don't make enemies of your enemies. Like, I'm going to be making enemies all day if I walk into the Capitol. So I cannot be there right now. I've chosen to walk away and let that go. But all of that kind of stuff is we've been led down this path so far to keep our blinders on and not see what the real reality is. And until we can remove that, what is the Mauna Kea thing? Aikamumukeke, like, until we can reveal that stuff and show our identity and be proud of what we are and what we've accomplished. Why do we have the success stories? Everybody tells our stories of our kingdom and our people of this bright, glorious time, but every victory had a downfall. Every single moment to get to a place of success and celebration, you had to have come from a dark place. And we've been there, we've done that, and we're now stuck in a place where we can no longer adjust to make better for our people and the environment that we live in. So coming up with a vision and future, yeah, we can talk about that all day. We can show you where some of those opportunities can level out the playing field for us in the visitors industry. Maybe we should only have 1 or 2 golf courses on every island instead of 5 or 6. Hotel industry, people say, where did all the water go if Lahaina was this Venice of the Pacific? Where did all the trees go? Well, first of all, they burned our town 3 times prior to this burning, and then we've had several fires before that as well. But anyway, we can get past that conversation, and let's look at the water. People say, where did all the water go? We had all the sugar cane going. Well, what took place of the sugar cane? It's not rocket science. It's right there in front of your eye. You got to drive past it every day. It's like blocks your view. That's what took all the water. We don't see it anymore. So we got to really look at it at one broad thing. Are we true about trying to create something that's better for Lahaina? Or are we just trying to get back to where we left off and carry on? Because that's what we see. That's what we see at home. We don't see it for us. We don't see it being any better. As much as we're trying, as much as we're fighting, as much as we run to every single opportunity to share our ike, to get our support out there, it's not turning this freaking Titanic of a movement here in Lahaina that's going to come and run us all over. Like, we're trying as best as we can. And we at every front we can. So people ask, how can you help? Bro, join us on the front line. As a matter of fact, take my spot because I like going rest. Like, it's just, I don't know. I could go on and on about the vision and the values, and we're making strides and thousands of acres we're trying to look towards, and we're designing the master plans, and we're using all the resources we can get. But even then, that's going to just be like fluff, because the other powers that being, they're not looking at any of this stuff, and they're going to let you run your show just so that you can continue to distract everyone else and look at you while they move their play. I see that happening every day. And so that's me. Sorry, thank you. That was my vent.
Thank you, Kaipo, for that. Jonathan, what about you? What is your utopian vision of wise stewardship?
It wasn't really utopian, but I tried.
Partly I'm just trying to sit and give us all the space to sit with all the ike that Kaipo just shared with us. I read a lot of science fiction for my hope, imagining impossible futures. I'm really a big fan of a guy named Kim Stanley Robinson. One of his latest books is a book called The Ministry for the Future, which refers to a fictitious small UN agency who is set up to speak for future generations, but they then develop a black ops arm to take jets out of the sky and all sorts of stuff to try and actually move the climate change forward that we need. And the vision that is set out in that is also one where, so much comes down to money. The discussions at the Capitol right now are about money, how much it's costing us to put people in hotels. But, if one of the things we learned from COVID is hey, if we need money, we get money. We just print it, right? Literally, it sounds crazy, but we printed trillions of dollars to let people get paid when they lost their jobs, to take care of their employees, right? And we actually got through it with no Great Depression, right? And so the vision and part of that is do quantitative easing, but tie it actually to carbon offset and other things. And the other thing is the devolution of governance to really at the local level. So Kaipo said far more beautifully than I can what's needed, and a lot of it is the devolution of capital into the ownership of communities. So work that the Lahaina Community Land Trust, other land trusts are trying to do to return assets to local control are just really job one as part of this. And I think part of this historical moment we're living in is that, so capital, local, national, and global is still a little bit nervous about what's happening in Maui Komohana. So the investment money is not flooding in, right? They're like, wow, what's gonna happen? How's it gonna rebuild? This is the one chance where a community or state or local or combination entity could really do large-scale investment to shift things over, water and other assets. Once we start to stabilize things, capital gets assurance, and then the prices start to drive up again. So it's not really utopian, but next step. Next step, if we really took the moment that we're living in to its best point and actually start to do that with none of the housing things that have been done in Lahaina are designed to increase local capital or family capital ownership, except unless you're a TBR owner. They're doing great by all the subsidies that they're getting. But locals who are renting, it's taking care of immediate housing needs. It's not building wealth in that community, and that's really what's going to change things. Call mine, not really an answer.
Just for some simple math, only just under 500 of our homes in Lahaina were actually owner-occupied. So if we're talking about 6,000 houses and only 500 of them were owner-occupied, that says something's wrong already. So if we want to talk about utopia, let's see some of that balanced out. Let's see a higher scale in our owner occupancy. Let's see equal opportunity in economic stability. Let's have integrated systems where food production can both serve the community and stabilize the economy. Let's diversify that economic downfall that we've seen. Let's bring that up. Let's spread it out. Let's require hotels to open all of their retail space to local businesses. They don't need Prada and Gucci and the Sunglass Hut and all of that, and not an ABC store. In the next hotel, get not an ABC store, and the next hotel get 2 ABC stores. We don't need those anymore. We never needed them to begin with. Build our space in there for our community. Have that leveled off. The hotels don't need the retail space renting that they're giving to these corporate businesses. They don't need that. That's like icing on top of the cake. They're not even. That's the sprinkles on the icing. Like, they really don't need that. Give it to us. And then we want to talk about food production and how our community can stabilize. Create tax incentives for people to grow more food within their properties. And then have that as a requirement that they have to generate that food into a system. Workforce development, whatever. Processing that and then putting it right back into the visitor industry if that's the largest economic engine we have. Let it build up and store for us. Let that circular economy. So when we hit one disaster, we're not panicking and running around and turning to a hotel anymore. We get one food system in place. We get an economic stability in our pocket. We get all of these things. We can find those things. They're right everywhere across there. So the utopia, yeah, it's a little hard to speak happy about the whole subject now because we're not in on happy space, but it's there. But we don't like waste and spin our wheels. Who said it the best, right? Like, never mind going out and wasting the money on these subjects because they ain't gonna manifest themselves all alone. We gotta build our community up. And so anyway, utopia it is.
Definitely. Lehu, what about you in the last couple minutes that we have? Do you have a utopian vision of Hawaii?
You know, one of the things that is present in my mind as I hear some of these descriptions of utopia and talking about what what abundance can look like, I think we need to acknowledge that days after the fire, the first people to come and help folks in Lahaina wasn't from the state, wasn't from the city, wasn't from the feds. It was the familial relationships of folks just across the way from Molokai, who brought their boats and who brought everything that they had that they could share with people of Lahaina. It's a really important piece of the puzzle when we're talking about the choices we make with the resources we have. You know, Molokai has, as we well know, has pushed back against the kind of development that we've seen in Maui and Oahu and the Big Island and other places. And it's important to note that when we're looking at the really hard decisions that have to be made, and people have actual resource, that they were there and they came in force, en masse. And I take that as a way in which we can look at the different ways that we can measure abundance and use some of those as the precursor for where we want to get back to. And this stuff still exists. The stuff Mike was talking about still exists. It's just in pockets. And we need it to be wide scale. And that's the hopeful part to me, is like, Hawaii has integrated to a place where, the fact that we're having this conversation in this room with all of the, what's the term Kapua uses, baby lawyers who have come up in the last half century at the William S. Richardson Law School is a hopeful thing to me. Like, that's the hopeful part. The fact that we have, local people and Native Hawaiians leading boards and commissions. That's the hopeful part, fighting for this change in these different ways. I like to call it about the Kapua's Pro. It's like, without Kapua's leadership in the water fight all these years in the different places and spaces that she has engaged, there would be a much more dim sense of what was possible than what we have today. Right? And so, Kaiko, I know you'd rather be farming than sitting in a board meeting. I know you'd rather be on Maui than sitting on Oahu right now. And Kaipo, I would also say to you that you're the kind of leader that we need to follow for each step forward through what's going on in West Maui. It's critical that you do lead us. It's critical that you do step forward and move forward, because I know it's bleak right now. But the day that we were in that meeting in Wailuku, when they had the map of Kuia, you could point to the satellite map and say, this is where the water goes, this is where the piles of rocks are, this is where the tree line was. I was amazed at that you could kilo that space in a way that allowed you to be able to share with the landowners who say that maybe they did not have a grasp of that. That's what it takes. That's what it takes. That's the hopeful part. We're not there yet, but we got to keep moving towards that.
Thank you, Lehu. Any final thoughts from any of the panelists as we near the end of our time together?
I like go first because I'll have the least important thing to say of the three. You talked about silver linings, and was like trying to think about and then break down that metaphor in my mind, and it's like, right, so you have a dark cloud, but the sun's shining through at the edges and the silver lining, but a dark cloud is not bad, it brings rain. But also, it's just shining on the edge because the cloud is thin. And really what amidst the disaster, the ongoing disaster that preceded the fires, goes through the fires and continues to this day, the agency, the leadership of people in Maui Komohana. Even in the midst of their grief and struggles, when they step back from the front line and take a rest, is the reason of hope for me.
Thank you. Lehu, what about you? Any last thoughts?
For me, just a huge mahalo to everyone. Anytime there's an opportunity to come and interact with you folks, I learn a lot. I'm kind of bumbling around as the board chair over here, and really wanting to concentrate on radio. And there's just this tremendous amount of work that persists. But then I got to go to Maui for 5 months to try to help after the fire, and nothing that we're doing on Oahu compares to the amount of effort and love and aloha and community that we saw in the wake of that. And so yeah, we got to keep going, and we have to do it in a way that brings community along and is side by side with kind of leadership that is step forward.
Thank you, Lehu. How about you, Kaipo? Any last thoughts?
Trying to develop a message for the audience, try to know how to read the room, learning these things as I find myself involved more often. I was able to be in the presence of an amazing gentleman. His name was Richard Likeke McCarthy, an amazing individual. And he's no longer with us, but before he parted, he gave us tremendous amount of tools for our toolbox. But before he left, he introduced us to other like-minded people, attorneys. And they still stand with us and support our efforts across our entire community. Definitely instrumental in supporting us and helping us accomplish the little wins and find the silver linings. And then, you get to know people like Dr. Jonathan Schur. And, growing up, when we hear those names, and I was always quiet, sidelined for the past 2 decades, but I've been in the rooms. And you never say their names without saying their full name, right? And Neil Hannes is one of them. Kapua Sprout's another one, right? You never say just Kapua. You never just say kneel, even though if most of our circles we're in, if you say kneel, we know who we're talking about. But it's just this respect and this reverence that is provided by them. And Kapua had been, even prior to the fire, had been bringing a team of, what did you guys call them? Baby attorneys? Did I hear that correctly? Okay. That's what you guys are comfortable with. Bringing a team of baby attorneys to our community in Lahaina when the interim in-stream flow standard was being implemented, when they started to identify us as a special management, dual source. They brought them in and they got us to be able to sit with our community and walk us through the process of filing for your GUPA and SUPAs and then understanding what, like I always heard of the Kapa'akai analysis, right? Oh yeah, the Kapa'akai analysis. It's always thrown out there and all these different environmental impacts and all these different things that we're advocating for in order to better our environment. But never did I have to ever walk through one of those and understand what that means in a detail to try and legitimize your argument for water. And now I know better because they brought those to us and they sat with us oftentimes at our dinner tables, even slept in our own residences, you know, like that's how committed that team was. And so you guys being in the room and learning these things, what is the way that one of my friends said it? Not all attorneys are created equal. So try to stay on the equal side because we need a lot of them. We need as much of them as we can get. And it can be daunting and overwhelming, I know, but thank you guys for making the effort. If I had gone into school when I should have, I probably would be more like doctor, but I would never have the experiences that I had. And we need both of those, right? Like we need the people in the Aleppo that can tell you what's happening and where it's happening, why it's happening and how it's happening. And then we need the people that know how to communicate that and stand in front of the bigger powers with the right language that can help us get a better stance. So thank you guys for your efforts, and I look forward to working with all of you in other capacities because we're going to need all that kind of help and support as we go into legislation. Legislation today, gone already, right? I said let's wipe them all clean. And next year, let's be ready and have teams in and look at the different policies that are coming from our community up. Like, there's so much that came out and none of them was from us. It was disgusting. So please, yeah, just keep doing what you're doing because we all get one place. You asked about from the panel before that, what do you guys call them? The settlers, supporting settlers. Like, everybody get one place. Unfortunately, even the bad guys get one place. And maybe their role is to make sure that we keep our eye on the good. I don't know, but everybody get one place. And thank you guys for finding yours and doing it.
Will you join me in giving a round of applause to our panel? Wait, Drew, I have remarks. Jumping the gun. I know I'm over time, but yeah. Okay, so mahalo nui to each of you for your time and mana'o. I wanted to just close out with a quote that I included in my conclusion for the article that I wrote for Symposium. It's from Mari Matsuda again, and it's a quote that she included in an article also for the Law Review in 2010 called A Richardson Lawyer that speaks to CJ's legacy and the legal tradition undergirding our law school, which is the only law school in Hawaii. And Professor Matsuda advises us that in the end, there is a judgment. I will cry, sorry. In the end, there is a judgment, whether cosmic or just personal, when you look in the mirror and ask, what did I do in my time on this planet? We heard earlier today that in many ways, the battle over Hawaii is a fight for the soul of Hawaii. I wondered, too, if it could be reframed as a fight for our own souls. Because Mari Matsuda invokes this idea of cosmic judgment. What is that if not the weighing of our souls that determines where we go? And she asks us what we will do. So what are we going to do to save Hawaii, but also ourselves? And with the climate emergency, this question is imperative. I also wanted to say that in our Foundations for Konawai class, which is taught by Uilani Tanigawa Lum, we talked about the difference between two words, moku and aina, and how land untouched by humans is called moku, and that it is us interacting with land that transforms it into aina. It's once Kanaka inhabit and dwell in a place that it becomes aina, or that which feeds. And as Uncle Kai and Kaipo discussed, the kupa of Maui generations ago engineered their environment to create the abundance of vai for which Lahaina is famed, which in turn created Kamalu'uluolele. And we have the ability to do that again now. Wayne posed this question earlier in the last panel, and I think that we can be the people who restore moku'ula, mokuhinia, kamalu'uluolele, enforce the public trust, heal aina, or as Wayne talked about, we can perpetuate plantation disaster capitalism, environmental degradation, and systems of oppression. And as Kaipo just said, there are so many ways that we can contribute, whether you are a clerk ghostwriting the next public trust opinion, or a kupa testifying in front of the commission, or a law student submitting testimony in support of SB 3327. So when we're faced with this question, what did we do in our time on this planet? We will answer, we fought for the soul of Hawaii. We fought for ourselves, and we fought for each other. Thank you so much.
Mahalo nui hali, both for the reprimand and for taking all the oxygen out of the room. I find myself again in a familiar position of the last 3 years of having to follow Holly Doyle. I want to mahalo again, panel 4, for the amazing conversation. And before I wrap up today's forum with some brief closing remarks, on behalf of the University of Hawaiʻi Law Review, I'd like to mahalo all of you for joining us today. And I'd like to extend the sincerest gratitude to all of today's panelists, particularly those who made the trip from Maui to participate in today's discussion. Please join me in another huge round of applause for all of today's speakers. So we began the program today by placing water within the appropriate natural, cultural, and spiritual contexts. Kumupueo Pata opened our space this morning with Oli, Pule, and Ike Hawaii to ground our substantive discussions around vai. In our first panel, we learned a bit about Chief Justice Richardson, the jurist, visionary, and poet who made so many contributions to justice over his lifetime. The legal experts on that panel illustrated the transformation of water law in Hawaii under the Richardson Court. They further expressed how the power and promise of the Hawaii Public Trust Doctrine, grounded in traditional Hawaiian practice, as not only an instrument for equity, but as an affirmative obligation that the state must enforce through its agencies, through its policies and administration of water management. They further called upon the state and its agencies to take a proactive approach to conservation and the application of the public trust. In panel 2, we heard from water protectors about their experience in advocating for water justice as leaders of their communities. We learned how important it is for farmers and cultural practitioners to advocate for water before the court, the Water Commission, and the legislature. But we also learned how important it is for lawyers, policymakers, and elected officials to put their feet and their hands in the soil. Those panelists stressed for us the importance of winning in the court of public opinion and how important it is to foster community in approaching that goal. Don't make enemies of our enemies. Social change demands a coalition, and each of us has a role and a stake in our water future. In panel 3, we learned about the challenges of upsetting the status quo and how the interests that exercise control over our water policy are still tethered to a plantation legacy. That discussion highlighted how real progress and real justice is possible when the Commission and the state approach their public trust obligations in good faith, consistent with the vision of C.J. Richardson and the mandate of our Constitution. It also highlighted how fragile that progress really is as long as politics continue to permeate our water policy. Landed interests, the governor, other political forces can strip away hard-won protections and public trust frameworks with the snap of a finger. The public trust provides a legal backstop, but as we learned today on the ground, the community is the real backstop. And historically, it is the community who has carried this burden. This work is difficult, but as Wayne said earlier, the most insidious form of settler colonialism is complacency. All of us, whether we are Kanaka or not, depend on Vai and carry this kuleana forward. And as we search for sustainable solutions, Uncle Kai reminded us that we must ask ourselves the question of if we might be looking for answers through a colonial lens. We just heard again from panel 4 that existing systems do not serve the people. It is not enough for the community to have a seat at the table. The community, and the Native Hawaiian community in particular, need the ability to set that table and to set the menu. As we heard, the solutions are there. Housing, food, economic stability, climate security, fire resilience. We have the model for a circular economy based in traditional and customary practice, and water is at the heart of everything. But it takes a shift in priorities. It takes the overturning of entrenched interests, and it takes all of us moving together on every front, not just Kaipo. We are at an inflection point. Our hope for the future hinges on whether we can pivot our society. Do we want to continue the status quo, or do we want to make the difficult choices necessary to ensure our future? Again, just as I did after panel 3, I will leave you with the idea of kuleana. Kaina Makua, a kalo farmer and kupa of Waimea, Kauai, puts it very bluntly. Kuleana sucks. And if you don't think kuleana sucks, you probably need to awamo some more. We have been privileged to be audience to these powerful and difficult conversations throughout the day. Whether you've been with us for only one panel or for the entirety of today's program, you now share in this kuleana to fight for our water future, for the soul of Hawaii. And as you awamo that kuleana, think like Chief Justice William S. Richardson. Think of the little guy downstream. Mahalo piha for joining us today. E ole kawai.
Round of applause for Drew.